and welcome to Solutions on Word, sponsored by Power in Interfaith Movement, hosted by Amadi Braxton and Bishop Dwayne Royster. This is one of your hosts, Bishop Dwayne Royster, Interim Executive Director of Power, the state of Pennsylvania's largest faith-based organizing movement, with 120 congregations of multiple faith traditions in 13 counties across the state. Along with me each and every week is Amadi Braxton, activist, documentarian, philanthropist, counselor, coach, and consultant. Miss Braxton, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Man, we've got a long weekend, too. Of course, for us, this is actually a working weekend because it's the King holiday, and this is kind of what we do. So each week we come to you.
Can I just say, before you go on with our intro, which is so beautifully written by yourself, by the way, I just want to say I'm one of the people that actually takes MLK Day as a holiday. Mm-hmm. I don't go pick up trash. I don't go paint schools. I rest. I reflect. Mm-hmm. I may listen to some, historical speech of his or read something by him. Mm-hmm. I always had a thing about, why is this the only holiday where people are expected to go out and do work? Well, so that's my stance. I don't disrespect anybody who does do volunteering on MLK Day, or, I think that's beautiful and fine, but that's how I choose to honor the day.
So let me just say that I hear that, and I have taken umbrage over the years that we make it a day of service. I never saw Dr. King with a paintbrush in his hand or a broom in his hand. He was about social change and transformation. It was about systemic change. So generally, he was in the streets boycotting, getting arrested, protesting, challenging political figures in their face. And so I always take umbrage at this notion of service. And this is part of the problem we have with the challenges in our community, because we think we can do service as a way to transform our communities and make them whole, with not recognizing that we actually have to change policies and racist policies, white supremacist policies, so that communities can be made whole. So I've always taken umbrage with the day of service. I've complained about it publicly, and it was in the paper about it some years ago as a result of that, because I took issue with it. It's like it's the day we should be doing action. If we're like you said, resting, but if you're not, you're going to be doing something, you should be doing action that's actually going to create systemic change that will impact people at their deepest, most core level. So I got you. Okay. So each week we come to you from 5 to 7 p.m. to bring you the organizers, movement and thought leaders, elected officials, and community members who are creating solutions to the issues that impact your life on the local, state, national, and international levels. On the board tonight is engineer extraordinaire, Troy Wilmore, who has wonderfully provided these new backgrounds for us. So they're light and airy and refreshing and welcoming. And so we thank you for that, Troy.
I'm your huckleberry.
On tonight will be a regular to our show who comes in with us offering political commentary quite frequently, is State Rep Chris Rabb, who'll be on around 5:20 or so. But of course, each week we welcome you as our primary guest. To join in the conversation, feel free to call 215-634-8065. Again, 215-634-8065. You can also listen to us online at www.wordradio.com, the WURD app. You can always download it at the Apple Play Store, or the Android Play Store, or the Apple, I don't know what the Apple thing is. And we're also on Facebook at forward.com. You can watch us right now. And hey, if you're listening to us through the Facebook app, or you're watching us through YouTube, would you share this to your page so that other people can join and watch this? If you're watching on Facebook, just hit that share button real quick, and so other people can catch up with us as well. All right, Miss Braxton, what's going on with you?
I am, there's a lot that has been unfolding since the siege on the Capitol. And we can talk about that later. And I know that we're going to be talking about some of that with State Rep Rabb and what he's seeing in terms of the state capitol and what might happen in the coming period there. And involvement of state elected officials in the siege and things like that. But I'm actually really, I'm interested in the pivot that we now make as a country toward the future.
Hmm.
And I was very heartened to know that moving trucks have showed up at the White House. There's moving boxes being brought in to get the orange, Agent Orange, Orange Cheeto, whatever we want to call him, Orange Monster, out of there. I do believe that him being out of power will dissipate his power, and I don't mean that just his political power, but his influence,
Hmm.
and his being permanently banned from Twitter and things will kind of mute his voice. So I'm looking forward to this next chapter, and Biden has unveiled his they keep calling these things stimulus packages, but they're really rescue packages. They're emergency packages, really,
Right.
because we're in a serious crisis and people are in serious emergency situations financially. So he has unveiled kind of his that package, his plans for dealing with COVID and getting us on the right track with dealing with COVID, as well as raising the minimum wage and doing better by essential workers and all of those things.
Hmm.
I've been glad to see him out in the last 3 days. I think each day he's been giving press conferences to really try to turn the page and allow us to refocus our attention. And I feel like we are the violent end to the Trump presidency. Really, I know it's not over. I know that there will likely be more violence. So we
Hmm.
can talk about that later today on the show. But I think that it does mark the beginning of a closing the books on this period of darkness, of dark politics, of reactionary policies, and this is the beginning of a light, the light being let in,
Hmm.
and we have to do a lot of work to make sure that that does happen and that we do not regress
Right. Absolutely.
backwards.
Absolutely.
But that is what I truly feel in my heart is happening and where we are. And that doesn't mean it's going to be light and easy and all warm and fuzzy. But we are going to have to fight for the kind of democratic system that is a multicultural, multiracial, racially just system of democracy, which it has never been.
Right.
But we have been fighting to make it that. And so that is what is ahead of us now. And I'm kind of excited to rise to that occasion. And, we're still going to have to deal with all the violent knuckleheads and the racists and neo-Nazis that are like the last gasp of the old way.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting. I've never really seen this done before, but in many ways, in the last few days, Joe Biden is already president of the United States, right? And I mean, he's come out. He's like, I got a 1.9 trillion, stimulus plan. As you said, a rescue plan that's coming. He's laying out some very broad, actually some progressive ideas. 30 billion being put towards housing and eviction, relief, rent relief. A lot of money being put towards COVID-19 relief. Because in reality, we've been a rudderless ship for the last, I would say since Election Day, we've been a rudderless ship. We haven't had
Yeah.
leadership. And so, under normal circumstances, the president-elect is pretty quiet until after the day of the election. But Joe Biden has literally had to step in on numerous occasions and begin leading the country, even though he had not officially been sworn in. He
Mm-hmm.
literally had to be the president. He's had to
Mm-hmm.
do it around COVID-19. He's had to do it around the insurrection. He's had to do it around, stimulus and putting together plans for the future. And at the same time, recognizing that he's been thwarted by the Trump administration in terms of being able to get the information that they need to be able to do a just transition. And so he's been president without being sworn in. He has not had a just transition. And I think this will go down in history as the worst transition between presidents ever. That there's not been information shared. His COVID-19 task force still does not have the information from Trump's COVID-19 task force. The Department of Defense has not shared their information. The CIA and other folk have not talked to their new counterparts coming in the door. I mean, this is very, very problematic. So I'm just thankful right now for leadership and for Joe Biden to not wait for permission to step in and start leading the country and offering hope. Because I think we have hope because Joe Biden has stepped up and said, and look, you know, I am, you know, I'm, he was not my guy. Okay.
Right.
Now, I voted for him in November, but he was not my guy originally. I wanted Elizabeth Warren
Right.
after, you know, I couldn't get Stacey Abrams. So, and I was heavily influenced by you on that. I just want to let you know that.
Oh,
So,
okay. Thanks for giving me some credit.
hey, you know, I listen. So, I just really appreciate leadership in this moment. That's what real leadership does. When there's a vacuum of leadership, real leadership steps up and points the way. And I think what Joe Biden's trying to do is point the way towards hope right now, but also realistic, right? He also understands that we got some really dark days ahead of us with COVID, that this is not over. We've spent so much time in the news, and, you know, in the morning show, we do this a lot too. We spend so much time talking about insurrection and Trump that we haven't dealt with the fact that COVID was just announced on Good Morning America 3 today that it is now the #1 cause of death in the United States. COVID-19 is.
Yeah.
Even with the mutation, and they said the mutation will become the dominant strain in this country in a very short period of time. So we still have a lot that we've got to contend with COVID-19. We do have an economic crisis brewing, and it's going to take more than this one stimulus bill to be able to generate that. And we do need to, you know, organize to press our new Democratic government, barely Democratic government, to do some really strong economic stimulus pieces, get people to work, get people the resources that they need to be able to do that. And will somebody please go to West Virginia and remind Joe Manchin that he's a Democrat? I'm just saying. He's got some issues. So anybody know anybody in West Virginia, they need to go to West Virginia and have a conversation with the senator and remind him that he is a Democrat. Mm-hmm. So anyway, yeah. So I mean, I think we're in this very interesting place right now. I think it is a place of hope, but I think you are 100% right to remind folk that we still got some stuff in front of us. Mm-hmm. And I was just reading an article in Huffington Post, which was really talking about the fact that, you know, Trump on his way out has really burned down the house in some ways. And so we're in a place where we've really got to rebuild at the same time. We've got to rebuild relationships across the world. You know, I can't even begin to imagine, you know, what Joe Biden's got to, you know, I'm sorry, we were dumb for 4 years. You know, our government, you know, couldn't get itself together. I keep saying that Donald Trump's 4 years as president of the United States is a demonstration of the failure of democracy, and that American democracy is not as cracked up to be because he should have been out of office in the first year. And so that this is very problematic. This is a crisis of epic proportions. And we really need to do some reevaluation about our checks and balances because evidently they don't work. Right. They really don't work.
Well, and I think, you know, Donald Trump's presidency is a demonstration of the rot of white supremacy at the core of our political system. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what it's really about. And that's why you see neo-Nazis and white supremacists storming the Congress and literally trying to burn it down. Right. They were prepared to take mass hostages and execute people, and you know, they had set up a gallows, makeshift gallows. Was wild. These people are crazy, and they're doing it all in the name of a white supremacist minority rule in this country. That's what they wanted to, and that's what Trump's presidency represented, their last great hope for that. Mm-hmm. And that is now over. That hope has died, and now it has to be permanently vanquished. All of those Republicans who voted after their office building was taken under siege for a lie, all of those Republicans need to leave office or be expelled or resign. I mean, that was 127 of them or something voted for that.
Between the Senate and the House, it was 141.
They voted to overturn the results of the election, meaning they voted to disenfranchise Black and brown voters across this country. Mm-hmm. They have to go. I mean, that is seditious to even have that vote. We think we're calling the people who stormed the Capitol building seditious. Voting to overturn the duly a duly elected president and vice president, that is seditious as well. So, but more on that after our break. We are up on our break now.
Yes. So you're listening to Solutions on Word with Amadi Braxton and Dwayne Royster. We'll be right back.
Now, a traffic update on WURD Radio.
Heavy volume on the Vine Expressway. Southbound 95 backs up through that construction zone, Coppin Avenue to Bridge Street. In New Jersey, seeing some volume on 42 on the southbound side between 676 and Creek Road. And 295 southbound a bit heavy now between 30 and 42. Report is brought to you by challengesweface.org. Something's wrong, we can feel it. Some of the news is biased, our social media too censored. Ever more extreme ideology is tearing us apart. What is fueling the division? Visit challengesweface.org. That's challengesweface.org to learn more. And for more traffic information, log on to sigalert.com. I'm Jason Lee with your Philadelphia area traffic.
Tonight, rain develops after 8 p.m., a low of 42. Showers end early to kick off your weekend, mostly cloudy skies for the afternoon on Saturday with a high of 48. Sunday still staying mild, partly sunny with a chilly breeze, a high of 45. By Monday, partly sunny and windy, temperatures back closer to average, a high of 42. And by Tuesday, we're still seeing a lot of sunshine, dry conditions in the low 40s. I'm NBC 10 First Alert meteorologist Brittany Shipp with your most accurate forecast. Count on it.
Hi, this is John.
Hi, this is Juanita, owners of JD's Auto Body and Painting. We're located at 6300 Wayne Avenue, right there at the intersection of Wayne and Washington Lane.
We really like to thank all you WURD listeners for the support that you've given our business, and we really hope to see you in the future.
JD, tell them about our products and services we have.
We have a new state-of-the-art paint shop along with our body shop and detail shop. We can help you with the dents and scratches from the winter season.
Come to JD's Auto Body and Painting. Come on out and check us out. We're still honoring that WURD 10% discount. Give us a call, 215-848-5949. Again, 215-848-5949.
Thanks again for supporting our business. We really appreciate you.
See you at JD's Auto Body and Painting.
This is not a fad for us. We will not resume our regular programming when things die down. We're not black to help our bottom line or because it's politically correct. We're not joining a fight. This has been our fight, our message, our people. Black lives have always mattered here. We are undeniably, indefatigably, unapologetically, permanently Black Talk Media. WURD. You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions on WURD. This is your host, Amadi Braxton, along with your other host, Bishop Dwayne Royster.
Yo.
And our special guest, as our frequent special guest, State Rep Chris Rabb of the 200th Legislative District.
Rabb.
Hi, Rep Rabb. We can't hear you. Is your sound on?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
We go. How are you this Friday?
Woo! That's a loaded question. I mean, I just got a breaking news about the NRA filing for bankruptcy because they're afraid a black woman is going to shut them down in New York, and they're moving to Texas. I got another text message, breaking news about the white cop who beat the mess out of a peaceful protester and how they dropped the charges on him. And that doesn't even get to the things that you all had me on the show to talk about. So.
That's true. There's a lot of stuff jumping off right now.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with your reaction. I mean, the reason why I wanted to have you on this week is because, the Capitol siege, the little attempted insurrection, and the, in D.C., but also the threat to state capitals as well. So I would love to just hear your reaction to everything that's happened and your analysis of that.
In short, it's crazy, but not entirely, unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
Black folk have known about the deep vein of white supremacy in every institution. This may be a surprise to CNN, It's not a surprise to WURD or none of us on this show, but you know, nevertheless, it was shocking to see. And let me tell you, let me give you some perspective, all right? Because for those of you who I need to remind, when I'm legislating, I'm 100 miles west of Philly. I'm in South Central Pennsylvania, in Harrisburg, and in a Tea Party dominated chamber. And I was leaving my Judiciary Committee hearing, and I was sitting next to a guy who is the founding chairman of the Law Enforcement Caucus. This guy loves law enforcement no matter what they do. So I said to him, hey, are you going to put out a public statement condemning how this mob beat the crap out of this police officer defending our Capitol? He said, no, I hadn't thought of it. And I'm like, there's international coverage of a mob of white people beating a cop, another white person, with an American flag. And I raised my voice so other people could hear, because I don't care. I'm colored. I had to say it, you know, this is my truth. And a lot of people embrace this reality because it's fact. There is video footage of white people damn near killing a white cop with an American flag. And then they found out that the guy who threw the fire extinguisher at another white cop is a retired white firefighter from Chester, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Right? So I asked him, I was like, what's the problem? Because he had a lot of things to say about Black Lives Matter and looting, but all of these people I work with were silent. And then at the beginning of the Judiciary Committee, we do the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm not saying this to say that I'm some kind of radical or I'm doing anything, but it was the first time in office in 4 years that I didn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Now, I was raised not to say it. And I raised my kids not to say it, because we don't pledge allegiance to a piece of fabric. And as a state lawmaker, I pledged my allegiance to the state constitution and the U.S. Constitution. That's the oath I took. And I'm good beyond that. I don't need to do in that political theater. So I sat down, and it wasn't something I thought about. I'd lacked the emotional energy to stand up. The hypocrisy was so great, because at the end of the Pledge of Allegiance is in liberty and justice for all. And these folks were hypocrites, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And so that really represents kind of where I'm at this week, because we have cowards in elected office who are afraid to speak truth to the power of white vigilantes who elect them and re-elect them, when they know that those folks are wrong. And sometimes they inspire that ignorance, and they will quietly say, oh, well, you know, I believe in the election results or whatever. But, you know, outwardly they play into it. And that's cowardice. That's weaponized cowardice. And it hurts everyone, including our participatory democracy and the institutions we claim to revere. And so these are folks in positions of power to make policy changes, including voting rights, electoral reform, public education, health care, criminal justice. And they're cowards. They're cowards. And that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. You know, you don't get points for doing the right thing when it's easy. You don't get points for that. How many times I remember saying to my parents way back when I was a teenager, I said, why won't you let me have a later curfew? I don't do drugs. I don't drink. They're like, you're not supposed to do that stuff. You don't give me credit for that.
Sounds like my mother.
Yeah. There's a very low bar, to put it mildly. Well, tell us about the what happened with the delayed swearing in of Senator Brewster, because that was a little mini insurrection or something. I don't know how you would characterize it.
I call it white on white violence.
Okay.
Which is deplorable. We need to fight the scourge of white on white violence. Black people, we need to rise up and help these people. They're killing each other. And they've been killing each other for millennia, right? But here it's political violence. It's white Republicans against a white Democrat who won fair and square by like 67 votes. Out of representing like 250,000 people, it came down to 67 votes. So all those people watching, listening, who say your vote doesn't count, wrong. This is how we kept the Democrat in office, because he got more votes than the next woman. And they didn't like it because it was late-breaking votes. It was votes counted after the election was over because of mail-in balloting. By the way, what people need to understand, not just, I know if they're watching corporate media on the national level and they're hearing Republicans saying it's stolen and stuff, well, you have to remember, if you live in Philly, we have this law because the majority of Republicans voted for this bill that became Act 77. I actually voted against it. Not because I don't believe in early voting, but I didn't like how the governor gave up rights that disproportionately hurt black voters to get this deal. And so I was a conscientious objector, even though the elements of Act 77 are in the bill I introduced that never saw the light of day. So they refused to seat him because they didn't like the fact that he won through, essentially all these Democrats and others who voted by mail. And so they were indignant, but because a Republican Trump-appointed judge on the federal level said, no, it's fair and square, he got belatedly sworn into office. So
just describe for people who don't know what happened there.
What happened with the vote count?
With Brewster being with the whole little.
And Fetterman too, right? It was also deposing of Fetterman.
Yeah, the whole scuttlebutt that occurred.
They did not let a fellow white colleague get sworn in. This is not a new colleague. This is a colleague they'd worked with. He'd already been in office. He got reelected, and they did not acknowledge the certified election results. Now, you can have election results like, okay, it's election night, it's clear this person won, but until it's certified, it's not legit. They questioned the certified election results of a fellow senator. So, look, we've seen, and when I said earlier about the white cop beating up the protester, I believe that protester was white, right? So
I'm not sure. It was a Temple student.
Yeah, but I think he was a white Temple student.
Okay.
There's certain framing that we should not use. I don't ever use the term black on black violence. That's just silly. But if we are going to use it, we got to talk about white on white violence, political violence, physical violence, cultural violence. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a civil war within the white community, if you can call it a community, within whiteness itself. And we have those folks who are saying, I understand that whiteness is a social construction and I have privilege, but I believe in racial justice. And that tends to be a younger, perhaps more urban subset of white folk. And then you have essentially an older, more conservative, and not exclusively older, more conservative, larger group of white folk who are like, I'm scared because they're coming for me. And they're going to have to figure that out. That's not our responsibility as black folk. I mean, it will impact us, of course, but there needs to be leadership within white people to figure out how they're going to figure out dealing with the browning of America in a globe that is already makes them the minority.
Before we go any further into this, I just want you to clarify for the audience, why do you not use the term black on black violence?
Because in the history of violent crime, or just crime, period, people commit crime against people who they live near. Nobody drives 100 miles away to stick somebody up. You stick up your neighbor. So white people stick up their neighbors, and their neighbors are mostly white. So it is a false equivalency. And if you're talking about black on black, then how come they emphasize that, but they don't emphasize any other racial dynamics when it comes to crime, particularly systemic crime? When you're talking about looting and they show pictures of black people, and then when it's white people, they call it something else. But when you're talking about looting, you should be talking about corporate America looting poor people, looting our communities, our neighborhoods, Wall Street, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're going to use the term, be consistent. And it it's a problematic term because, listen, if there was a truly integrated neighborhood, and I guess I live in one of those neighborhoods, Mount Airy, you're going to find crime against folks with different races because they live next to each other. Not because they're Black. Now, you can say that there are people who are involved in criminal life because they feel disconnected from society and they are overrepresented by Black folk, right? Who are the most disconnected from society. And you can say the same from people who come from the underclass, who are poor white folk who feel similarly, but not because of their whiteness, but because of their class identity. But it's very different to say Black on Black crime as though that's something that's
like we have some kind of predilection.
White people do to white people.
Yeah, it's like as if we as Black people have some kind of predilection toward cannibalizing our own communities or something like that.
Yeah, there's no evidence of that in world history, and we can just look at Capitol Hill to prove that. These are literally folks who were talking about Blue Lives Matter 6 months ago, and then they're trying to kill fellow white people who are wearing uniforms protecting their own.
Let's clarify that. They killed further.
That's right.
They killed.
That's right.
One by hitting with a fire extinguisher, and the second one breaking down and committing suicide. So they killed.
Thank you for making that clarification.
And I saw an interview this morning with another white police officer, a Capitol Hill police officer, who was talking about who was attacked viciously by that mob, and who talked about his experience of that. And he said that they were ripping off the his badge, taking his the clips for his gun, the extra clips of ammunition from his gun off of his belt. They were like trying to just strip him down. And then he said one of them started grabbing for his gun, and he could hear people saying, "Kill him with his own gun, kill him with his own gun." And, he was telling the story in a calm manner, but you could tell that he was obviously very rattled by the whole situation. And these are the folks that supposedly are like Blue Lives Matter supporters. Exactly.
I mean, but here's my issue, right? So there are dozens of Capitol Police that have been suspended because they are suspected of being conspirators in this process, right? I haven't heard anybody from the FOP come out and say anything. I haven't heard any of the other police unions come out and say anything yet. These were Capitol Police. They were Secret Service that were being attacked. They were DC Metro Police. Now, DC Metro Police, they've said all kinds of things about this because they were the ones that had to come in and give backup because Mario Bowser had requested a week prior the National Guard and was denied. That's right. And denied. And then
because
the governor
DC
of Maryland.
DC is not a state, and so therefore they have no control over their own guard troops that are in DC.
It has to be controlled by the federal government.
Yeah.
But then neighboring state, Governor Larry Hogan, who was a Republican, had his National Guard at the DC border ready to come in to race down to the Capitol to do what they had to do, and they couldn't get the permission from the federal government to cross the line into DC to bring the National Guard in.
Mark my words, this is going to be a rabbit hole like no other, and it will expose for white people, because I don't know many Black people are going to be surprised to hear that white supremacists have infiltrated law enforcement, and many people will remind people that the origins of policing itself relate to either slavery, or in the case of Pennsylvania, surveilling free people of color, as well as those who were enslaved, right? It started in this state in 1700, and we had our first police force in the state in Philly in 1855. And so this is not a surprise to most Black folk and folks who identify with communities of struggle, but for white folk who've never had to look at law enforcement with a critical gaze, they're going to get an education real quick. And this is an important teachable moment that shouldn't have required this to have the type of discourse that's happening now in corporate media. And corporate media is complicit, because if you couldn't say systemic racism or structural inequality or capitalism, I mean, I don't even know how many times the term capitalism has been used in a critical sense in corporate media. That's the beauty of WURD and independent radio and media generally, is we have permission, we have the diversity of thought to talk about these things without doing these self-editing. But now we're going to have types of conversations that we should have been having for generations. And the absence of those meaningful conversations has led to the type of policies that have impacted our communities in deeply egregious ways.
Yeah, Rep, we need to go to break here. I figured you're going to hang on with us because you always do, and we really appreciate that because we get into these good conversations, these rich conversations. So you're listening to Solutions on Word with Amadi Braxton and Dwayne Royster with our special guest, State Rep Chris Rabb. We'll be right back after these messages.
Now, a traffic update on WURD Radio.
Watch for an accident on the boulevard tonight. It's on the northbound side, just north of Wissahickon Avenue. It is off to the side, but the delay goes back to the Schuylkill Expressway. We also have a crash on 95 northbound at 322. The left lane is blocked here, and this delay goes back to 452. Elsewhere on 95 northbound, we're heavy. Betsy Ross Bridge through Bridge Street. And southbound, we back up through the construction zone, Coppin Avenue to Bridge. That's where we go from 4 lanes down to 3 lanes. Schuylkill Expressway, that's heavy. Montgomery Drive out to Spring Garden Street. Westbound side backs up through the construction zone. University Avenue to 30th with the left lane blocked. The Vine, heavy westbound. The entire stretch, 95 to the Schuylkill, and eastbound backs up 76 up to 8th Street. Report brought to you by challengesweface.org. Something's wrong, we can feel it. Some of the news media is biased. Our social media too censored. Ever more extreme ideology is tearing us apart. What is fueling the division? Visit challengesweface.org to learn more. And for more traffic information, log on to sigalert.com. I'm Jason Lee with your Philadelphia area traffic.
Tonight, rain develops after 8 p.m., a low of 42. Showers end early to kick off your weekend, mostly cloudy skies for the afternoon on Saturday with a high of 48. Sunday still staying mild, partly sunny with a chilly breeze, a high of 45. By Monday, partly sunny and windy, temperatures back closer to average, a high of 42. And by Tuesday, we're still seeing a lot of sunshine, dry conditions in the low 40s. I'm NBC 10 First Alert meteorologist Brittany Ship with your most accurate forecast. Count on it.
Need to replace your Social Security card? In most states, you can request one online with a My Social Security account. A My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal earnings history and benefit status. You can also get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his own words. Brought to you by Pico, Keystone Plus, Premium Nutrition Meals, and JD's Auto Body and Painting. The immortal words of Dr. King.
What I'm saying to you this morning, my friend, even if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, go on out and sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Handel and Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. If you can't be a pine on the top of a hill, be a scrub in the valley, but be the best little scrub on the side of the reel. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. It isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are. And when you do this, you've mastered the length of life.
Brought to you by Pico, powering communities, Keystone Plus, Premium Nutrition Meals, and JD's Auto Body and Painting for all your auto body and detailing needs. You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions on Word. I'm uplifted by that MLK excerpt that we just heard. So appreciate WURD for sprinkling that in this on the eve of MLK Day weekend. We are back with State Rep Chris Rabb. I'm Amadi Braxton, along with Bishop Dwayne Royster.
Hello.
And we've been talking about the perspectives on, the insurrection that happened in the Capitol. And I want to actually ask you, State Rep Rabb, about what you think the implications are for Republicans in the State House and the kind of Tea Party caucus, as you call it, which I think you're referring to the entire Republican caucus in the House, the State House. I don't know if there's a few people who fall outside of that categorization, but I think we're seeing, and I think a lot of national media is talking about how the division within the Republican Party, there are some fractures now in the National Republican Party, because you had, 10 Republican Congress people voting to impeach Trump the other day, which, gosh, we haven't even talked about that. Trump was the first president to be impeached twice. And as Nancy Pelosi said, he can be unique if he wants that way, but we're going to make it happen. And so you see 10 people kind of peeling away from the hegemony of Trump support. And you're starting to kind of hear some, mumblings and rumblings on the Senate side at the national level. And you're seeing a massive flight of corporate America away from funding Republican candidates in the Republican Party, the Republican National Committee. So, and I'm excited at the possibility of this kind of continued fracturing in that party, because the part of the party, which is the majority, has been white supremacist at its core from its beginning. Let's just be clear about that. And all of those reformed Republicans now who are maybe learning the fact that their party was this way the whole time. But I'm just wondering, how do you see that having an impact at the State House at all? Do you see any kind of similar shifts happening or cracks in the facade of unity?
Yeah, that's a really good question for all of us to contemplate. But given that I work under the dome, this is my perspective. As it relates to policies, they say that state legislatures are kind of the labs, right, to figure out what policies work. And then the feds, Congress will say, oh, this worked in these states, let's do it, let's nationalize it, right? Mm-hmm. But when it comes to like the politics, like the partisan politics, I think it's top down. And I think a lot of Republican state legislators are going to be looking at what Republican Congress people and senators do to give them perhaps more freedom to speak more authentically. And most of them are cowering from this moment to speak up and truly be patriotic. It's not a term I like to use a lot, but if you're going to traffic in that language, then to be a true patriot is to stand up for your nation, irrespective of political affiliation, right? And they have not done that. I'm in a body of 203 with 123 Republican colleagues, 2/3 of whom signed a letter saying that the elections in Pennsylvania were a fraud.
Based on their law that they passed about mail-in voting.
Now, granted, 1/3 of them believe it, but the majority don't believe it, but they signed it anyway. That goes back to me saying cowardice is eroding public trust and public service amongst my colleagues. So, but to get in a little deeper, there are folks like Liz Cheney, who's an old school conservative Republican, who found this and who I couldn't be more different than politically.
Mm-hmm. Daughter of Vice President Dick Cheney, Darth Vader under President George W. Bush, who was the previous worst president in history before Trump came in. But anyway, go ahead.
Right. right? She says this isn't what conservative republicanism is about, that there's nothing that resembles what she embraces that would allow for something like that to happen. And as a true conservative Republican, she can't stand for it. Now, personally, I think her policies are racist, but they're racist in a different way. And I think a good point of reference is under the Bush administration, W's administration, there were corporate Republicans and there were populist Republicans, like Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin, who was against the illegals. And please, for those of you who are listening, I'm using air quotes. That's a very foul language I don't like to use. They're talking about undocumented Americans. And they wanted to expel all of them, no matter how long they lived in this country or how many taxes, how much they paid in taxes. They didn't care. George W. Bush wanted them to stay so that corporations and other entities could benefit from their cheap labor without extending them the rights they deserve. They're both racist, but in conflicting ways. And that's what's happening now. The Republican Party is going to have to figure out what is the best form of racism they want to embrace. Now, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, but there's also racism in the Democratic Party, which I'm happy to talk about too. But you were talking about the Republicans, and that's my perspective.
So, I mean, I think part of this for me is, and we intimated it for a minute and then kind of passed by it really quickly. But in the Senate chambers last week, by virtue of the Pennsylvania State Constitution, the Lieutenant Governor oversees the opening session of the Senate. Right? If I'm understanding, it is in the Constitution.
Yes.
The Republicans threw out the Lieutenant Governor from overseeing the Senate that day. And so this is, and I'll tell you why I bring this back up. Because this is how Trumpicans will continue to live on in Pennsylvania, right? So I separate Republicans from Trumpicans. And part of this is some people know that actually my grandfather years ago, 40, 60, 70 years ago, was actually a Republican committeeman in the city of Philadelphia when black folk were actually Republicans.
That's right.
So there's but I separate Republicans from Trumpicans. Now, I don't agree with either one of them, but I think that one's drinking the Kool-Aid and the other ones are just, conservatives. But they literally threw John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor, out of the Senate chambers and from doing his constitutional duties because they didn't like the fact that he was going to try to swear in Brewster.
And he's a tall guy. He's a big guy.
6'8".
Yeah, he's 6'8", and it is not. Yeah, we'll just leave that at that. But so when you are like, it's very easy for black folk to say, "Look how they treat us," but look how they treat each other.
Yeah.
Right? That's deep. That's deep, and we don't talk enough about that. And they were prepared to treat their own with great antipathy. And the height of irony, and you brought it up, Bishop, is in the moment where their constitutional responsibility is most central on that day of swearing in, that's when we take an oath. And most people, do it on a Bible or whatever. They're pledging an oath to the state constitution and to the U.S. Constitution. And in that moment, they defied a nation of laws, right? Rule of law. This is what the conservatives were saying. They were certainly saying it when we were out expressing our First Amendment rights as black folk, as Latinx folk, as queer folk, as white folk, when we were demanding justice around police accountability. And they were talking about rule of law and this and that and so forth. But when it comes to their very own inauguration, they put all of those rules and constitution aside because they are discomforted by the fact that their guy lost. And it was fair and square. So fair and square that a Trump-appointed federal judge said it was fair and square. And so they had to end the political grandstanding and belatedly inaugurate this fellow white senator into office. And it could have all been avoided if they had any integrity. And Bishop, when you talk about your grandfather being a Republican back in the day, you're right. The vast majority of black folk were Republicans, right? We kept our interests the same. We kept our values and priorities the same. The party betrayed us.
That's right.
Right? The party betrayed us. And that may happen with the Democratic Party. It's certainly happening with the Republican Party, and this predominantly white body is going to have to decide how they're going to govern and how they're going to politic going forward, and it's going to be very interesting. And it will also influence how conservative Democrats, and that's not a conversation a lot of Philadelphians are used to having, because, you know, we have conservative Democratic voters largely in Northeast who probably voted for Trump, and, you know, but
in South Philly,
South Philly, but yeah,
wards that went for Trump, right?
Right. But we need to talk about how, like, the most important, the most influential member of the Senate now is not Chuck Schumer, who's going to be majority leader on January 20th. It's not going to even be the vice president, who is the president of the Senate, Kamala Harris. It's going to be Joe Manchin,
that's right,
who's the most conservative Democrat there, and he's going to say, if you want me to play ball, you got to give me something. Otherwise, I'm going to bounce. I'm going to become an independent. I'm going to caucus with the Republicans. This is a dynamic very similar to what's happening in Harrisburg. I sit in front of the most conservative Democrat in the entire House, and he founded the Blue Lives Matter caucus.
Wow. Well, look, State Rep Rab, we appreciate you. And what were you going to say, Marty?
We have to move on.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Unfortunately.
Are we getting signals from the studio room?
Well, it's about that time to wrap up this segment.
Well, I just wanted to say, I just had one last question for Rep Rab, which is, are you concerned about your safety in the state capitol in Harrisburg, based on what you saw?
I'm hoping my mother's not watching this. I am. I feel like I've had a target on my back just being unapologetically black and progressive in Harrisburg. But now I know they're prepared to kill white folk, and they're prepared to kill white folk from their own party, conservatives from their own party. They don't care about me. And I have to trust law enforcement in Harrisburg to protect me. And we know that white supremacists infiltrate all levels of law enforcement. So I don't know, the folks who are the most armored and armed aren't sympathizers. So yes, I am nervous, and I'm making that choice day by day about what I need to do to protect myself, my staff, and my family. And my staff, I've shut down my office, and I'm not going to Harrisburg because we were told to stay away because there's concerns that fake militia are going to come and do violence to property and people.
Wow. Well, Rep Brad, we're going to, first of all, be praying for you and your family, and also all of the legislators that are in Harrisburg. And I'm glad that they're shutting things down there. Folk have asked us, the power, what are we going to do? And my mother said, if people want to act like fools, and go ahead and let them. And so, we're not going to put folk in harm's way to deal with that. That's, that's also up to the military and others, and the National Guard and police forces to deal with their own. Because that's their own folk, right, that they've got to go contend with in this particular moment in time. But we appreciate you. One of these times we're going to get on here, though, while we've talked about the Republican Party fracturing, we really need to talk about the Democratic Party fracturing too, right? There's fracturing happening on that side, and we need to have some conversation about that. But listen, we appreciate you coming on. When you do, it's always good to have a conversation with you. We learn so much from engaging with you. And we look forward to talking with you real soon. You're listening to Solutions on Word with Amadi Braxton and Dwayne Royster, and our guest, who is now just leaving, State Rep Chris Rabb, who, again, we thank. We look forward. We'll be back on the other side. Give us a call. We look forward to getting in conversation with you now.
Have you heard about City Council's plan to build more affordable housing, repair existing homes, create jobs, and support small business? The Neighborhood Preservation Initiative will invest $400 million in Philly communities. Read about it at www.phlcouncil.com/NPI.
The WURD Radio Newsletter, keeping you informed, engaged, and connected. Sign up by visiting WURDradio.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page and type your email address under Connect with Us. You'll receive the latest information on WURD Radio, messages from our president and CEO, Sarah Lomax Reese, exclusive articles and multimedia content, and resources. Stay informed with the WURD Radio Newsletter. Join Nick Taliaferro on Martin Luther King Day, Monday, January 18th, for a special edition of Evening Words, featuring 2 roundtable discussions with activist preachers in the mold of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. That's this Monday, January 18th on Evening Words with Nick Taliaferro, 4 p.m. till 7 p.m. exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD. Streaming live on WURDradio.com, the WURD Radio app, or watch live on WURD TV via Facebook and YouTube. Lifting every voice till earth and heaven ring. This is WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD Philadelphia. Black Talk Media. You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions on WURD. This is Dwayne Royster along with Amadi Braxton. So we just had a great conversation with State Rep Chris Rabb. We've deeply appreciated him always spending some time with us and really working to address some of these issues. We got a couple callers on the line, so we want to get folk in and be a part of this conversation today. And so first up, we have Lynn from Darby. Lynn, welcome to Solutions on WURD.
Hey, Bishop and Armani, how are you?
Thanks.
Good, thank you.
Good.
That's great. I enjoyed Chris Rabb's interview, and you know what? Like he said, it wasn't no surprise when the Capitol got sieged on because, you know, with all this Proud Boys, the Ku Klux Klan, they've been there forever, and you know, just isolated attacks on blacks. I just thought it was a matter of time. But, guys, we need more aggressive Democrats. I mean, ever since they wouldn't let that Judge Obama point, you know, I'm getting a senior moment. Help me out. You know, during his reign, they wouldn't
appoint the Supreme Court nominee.
Yeah. Now, we should change our attitude just right then because that's when they started acting, well, they've been acting real mean, but we should have got right with them, you know. And these white supremacists, it is scary to know that, like, they right next to us. You know, I got a Biden-Harris sign on my lawn, and, you know, I had told my sister a few times it's this truck that goes riding around Darby saying, you know, bad word Biden. And I got kind of paranoid when they passed me, and I'm taking groceries out, and they're at the corner, and I see that flag, and, you know, I started to take my sign down. But something in my heart said, no, don't do it. But we just have to wake up for unity. But first, justice and equality for black and brown folks got to come first. Biden runs on that ticket. I'm a president for everybody. No, he can't be no president for them nuts. He has to start by implementing those policies on Mitch's death, the John Lewis voting rights law, the George Floyd, policy. We have to make those into laws. I don't have time for that. I'm a president for everybody because everybody is not for us. And I just wanted to comment on King's Day. Armani, I believe in King's Day. I think we shouldn't name it the Day of Service. But I'm going to tell you, at our church, First African Baptist Church in Darby Township, that is an awesome day. We have breakfast, then we clean our church from tip to toe, and we have different categories. We bag foods and toiletries for the nursing home. And we tell the kids about Martin King's work back in the day. We compare to his work today, and they sing and have little speeches for us. And I don't think we should call it a day of service, but we need to service our churches, our own neighborhoods, and we need to have that for about 4 times a year. Like on his birthday, the anniversary of his murder. That's a horrible thing to say. But we need to remember him more and teach the kids and people who don't know about him more. And the lottery, I'm going to build my own black town. And Solomon Jones suggested I call it Sankofa. So if you guys want to get in on my new black town after I win this lottery, you're welcome to it.
Thank you, Lynn.
Okay?
We appreciate you so much. We
Thank
appreciate
you. I will
Thanks
I will definitely come to your all black town for sure. And I think what you described that happens at your church every MLK Day is sounds wonderful.
Thanks for that, Lynn. We appreciate you. All right. We got Gary from Southwest. Gary, welcome to Solutions on Word.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Hello, Bishop Royster and Amadi.
Hello.
I was listening to the segment with State Rep Rab, and I really enjoyed what he said. One thing about the police, most people don't understand. The police were formed; they were slave patrols. So we've never had a positive history with the police department at all. This incident that happened in Washington, and also having 45 as president, if that doesn't wake us up now to understand that we live in a overwhelmingly racist society that we built, I don't know what will. And in reference to the Republicans being the bad guy, I'm not mad at them because they come out and say what they mean and mean what they say. I have an issue with the Democratic Party, which we've been so extremely loyal to, and they're racist in the Democratic Party too. Let's not ignore that fact. Now, when we have these black elected officials, if you don't have the courage to stand up and forcefully represent our people and deal with the injustices, then you don't need to be in office. We have to stop putting people on a pedestal that don't deserve to be there. You know, we live in the city of Philadelphia and the state of Pennsylvania, and that's just the truth. So when are we going to really address those issues? I'm tired of, when we talk about these particular issues, I never hear any of these elected officials that look like me calling in with any solution or just speaking the truth.
Well, but I mean, Gary, for a minute, but Gary, hang on a second.
Yes.
So the folk, I mean, there's two things about this, right? One, these folk are elected by the people in their communities, oftentimes where there are no black people out there to not elect them into office, right? So that's one piece. The second piece is that we have to do a redistricting battle, which is coming up right now for this year, that will redraw the boundaries for the Senate, redraw the boundaries for the state Senate, for the state House, in addition to the U.S. Congress. And so, you know, you remember just a couple of years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court threw out the districting for Pennsylvania because it was gerrymandered to be discriminatory. We're going to have this same battle again, right? So if we really want to see this change, then part of this is that we've got to get into this redistricting fight that is actually done between the governor, the legislature, and the state Supreme Court. And there's a way that we can, from the outside, offer influence into what that process looks like. There's a review period, there's a comment period on it, there's a lot of things that we can do. But unfortunately, the way things are drawn right now, unless a whole group of black folk move into an area enough to be able to change a election, we're going to keep getting stuck with these same white politicians over and over again. And then we're going to have black politicians in Philadelphia who are serving or trying to serve us, who will consistently get outvoted. I've said this about Pennsylvania all the time. Outside of Philadelphia, everybody hates Philadelphia. They hate it for two reasons. One, Philadelphia puts more money in the state budget than any other municipality. And then two, Philadelphia gets a lot of support out of the municipality, though we don't get out what we put in. And I think we should be very clear about that. We don't get out what we put in. And so there's like these challenges. I mean, you know, I appreciated actually what you said and also what Lynn said a little while ago about having aggressive political leaders, but they can be progressive, but as long as they don't have the votes to be able to win, we are consistently stuck in the same cycle over and over again. Now, I mean, you know, if Lynn wants to take her Sankofa and move it to the middle of the state, you know, so we can create and get some folk out there in a different district, then that's a way to do that. But I think this is part of the challenge that we have, right? So where is the leverage? The leverage is in redistricting. The leverage is going to be getting those lines drawn differently so that although Democrats are the majority in the state of Pennsylvania, these lines are drawn in such a way that Republicans always maintain power. And I think we've got to get very astute to what that means, and then we've got to be able to bring our force to bear in making sure those lines are drawn fairly, and that not only do Democrats get the right, but the black and brown folk are able to get the votes that they deserve and the representation they deserve as well.
Well, Bishop Royster, how can the community be a part of that? I mean, these politicians, knowing the environment and what's going on, shouldn't they be educating the people and informing them about what's going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think we'll see that heat up probably in a few months when they start to get serious about this. So this is what happens to redistricting. There's a commission that's appointed. The head of the Senate appoints folk. The head of the House appoints, the General Assembly appoints folk. The governor appoints folk. They try to come up with something. If they can't agree on it, then it goes to the state Supreme Court to come up with a decision about what the redistricting looks like. So we have the ability to influence the governor. We have the ability to influence both these other folk that are on this commission that's coming up with this plan. And we just need to be loud and in their faces and making them feel the heat that if they don't do right by this and this is not right, then we're not going to sit back and take it. And then we will maybe start moving folk out to vote them out of their districts. You know, I mean, it could be anything like, you know, those possibilities. But I think that that's part of what we have to do, how we have to leverage the power in this place. And I think we also need to go after corporations. Whether we realize it or not, corporations have a lot of undue influence in this state. And if some of these corporations that are here all of a sudden recognize their bottom line is going to be impacted because the people that they are funding, and whether it's the president and CEOs writing checks to political action committees or, you know, members of the staff are doing that are funding these candidates and keeping them in their place, or these PACs that are out there doing it, if they're not going to do the right thing, then we're going to stop using their businesses, stop supporting them, and hit their bottom line. We'll begin to see some transformation there, too.
There's unlimited spending that is allowed. There's unlimited political spending that is allowed in the state of Pennsylvania, which is outrageous. Anybody, you know, Chris Rabb talks about this a lot, State Rep Rabb talks about this, that he could get $1 million check from a corporation, and it would be legal under state law here. And that is, I mean, talk about undue influence. That is major. Go ahead, Gary.
What about the group ALEC?
Oh, they have major influence in the state. Major.
Right, that's my point.
The American Legislative Exchange Commission, just so people just so people know who that is. It is an organization that was funded by the Koch brothers, the billionaire brothers, ultra-conservative brothers, who have actually put millions of dollars, billions of dollars actually, into ALEC. They hire all these really sharp lawyers to write legislative plans that are basically complementary to business and really, at the end of the day, about keeping the power in the hands of white folk. So anyway, go ahead and ask your question about ALEC.
No, I was just going to say, a lot of people don't know about ALEC, and what you just explained, what goes on, and it's to the detriment of our community and our people. And I'm just saying, I'm going to close on this note. We need our black elected officials to be more forceful, and they need to engage with the community to help organize the community to do what we need to do to get fairness. We built this country, and they benefit from it. I'm going to leave on that note.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary. I want to just add a point to the conversation with Gary, which is that if we really want to, over the long term, crack the white hold on this state, the white kind of, you know, right-wing hold in the state legislature, we have to start connecting with our rural communities and find the commonalities between the struggles we're having in the urban areas, in majority cities of color, with the struggles in poorer rural areas that may be majority white. We have to start doing that, and we need people who are willing to have a populist, progressive populist agenda that can unite different people from different places in the state around a common agenda of, you know, better wages, better paying jobs, safety on the job, and a whole, you know, and a racial justice agenda as well. I alluded to this before, and we really have to get these folks on the show, but I read a whole article about not racial profiling, but economic profiling of poor white folks by police and police abuse in mostly white communities that are poor and riddled with the problem of the opioid epidemic. People are profiled, pulled over, and fined, and that is a source of income for a town, but it is an abuse of power by the police. So I think that there would be if we framed the issues in the right way, we could find common cause. Racism is always going to be a barrier to that, but we have to find ways to overcome that. And there's a lot of people that have done good research and work around how do you message a progressive, cross-racial, economic agenda message that can reach people who we don't think can join us. It is possible, and we need politicians who have the courage, and we who are connected with folks who are doing organizing on the ground have to push forward that message. I think, you know, Poor People's Campaign is doing that. I think Power is trying to do that as you expand your reach in other parts of the state outside of Philadelphia. That's what we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, let me be clear, right? Anat Shaker, Dr. Anat, last name is Shaker, is founded the work around race-class narrative, right? Which is way we have to find ways to have a conversation about race and class. You can't talk about the economics in this country and not talk about race. And this is where the problem is, and why we've never really been able to get over it, is because we've detached the two. We have racial justice, and then we have economic justice on another side. They're actually tied together. In this country, the economy was built off of racism, slavery, and white supremacy. It hasn't changed. And so until we actually do a bit of education helping people to understand that, it becomes important. The second thing, and Amadi, I really appreciate you saying this, a lot of people do not understand the demographics of Pennsylvania, right? Pennsylvania is 80% white. It's like 79.6% white. Let me say that again, 79.6% white. At the state level, we will always get outvoted unless we have partners and allies who are white folk that we are working with across the state. And I think that that's a really important thing. I think sometimes because we're in Philly, and Philly's a majority black city, it's the largest, African Americans, the largest group in the city, and we have black power, we have black political power here, we think that translates across the rest of the state. The rest of the state could care less about Philadelphia. Matter of fact, they probably would be glad if we left. Some people would be glad. They want our money, but they don't want us. And so there's often a block of legislators, in particular those in parts of the state that really don't care for Philadelphia, that do everything they can to block what's happening in Philadelphia. And I think we have to, we need to do that level of education with folk to really take a look at the demographics of the state of Pennsylvania. And when you begin to realize that 80% of the state is white, unless you have white allies, you're never going to win anything. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You can win in Philly, but you can't win anyplace else. And so then what does it mean for us to have to rethink the work that we're doing, like you talked about the race-class narrative, and getting out in other communities and beginning to have that conversation? That becomes very, very important for us. I know we got a caller on the line that's out there right now, and my phone went dead, so I couldn't see who it is.
Well, we're going to go to break, I think, first. Troy's suggesting we go to break, and on the other side, Woody, hang in there. We'll get you right on the other side of this break.
Just one more step. You got it.
You're doing great. This is the sound of a nationally ranked top rehabilitation hospital, home to the largest collection of robotics in the United States, where we continually exceed patient expectations, because no injury is too severe or too minor for our care.
There you go.
This is the sound of success. Moss Rehab. Challenge accepted.
Clark Roofing Company has over 30 years of quality roofing experience, providing exceptional customer service, honesty, and professionalism. Clark Roofing is a second-generation master roofer, installing top-quality roofing systems for commercial and residential properties across the tri-state area. For fast, dependable service, call 215-365-ROOF. That's 215-365-7663.
Livelihood, the new initiative from WURD Radio, connecting Philadelphians to jobs, entrepreneurship opportunities, small business resources, and financial literacy. Visit WURDworks.com right now and take the next step in your professional journey. Livelihood is supported by the Nightland Fest's Local News Transformation Fund, Borealis Philanthropies Racial Equity and Journalism Fund, and the Solutions Journalism Network. You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions on WURD. This is Amadi Braxton along with Bishop Dwayne Royster.
Hello.
And let's go straight to Woody in Winfield. Thank you for waiting, Woody. How you doing?
Well, after the end of a day at the barbershop, I guess I'm pretty tired, but I heard you guys talking, and you always bring wonderful education to the airwaves as it relates to politics and things around us. My problem is, as Donald Trump stated when he first got in office, right a couple of days before he did, that African Americans, what the hell you got to lose? Your schools are messed up, you can't get money from your banks, and you're being gentrified out of your neighborhoods. He was right. He never did anything about it, and I don't think any politician is going to really do anything about it, because the major problem we have here is that there are millions of people that are uneducated that graduate with diplomas as receipts for educational services never truly rendered. Reading, writing, arithmetic, those are the old fundamentals. A good 1 to 5th grade education, I'm talking about a good one, can take you very, very far. After Donald Trump made that statement, I would love for both of you to check out an article I did back in 2016, Philadelphia Tribune. It was entitled A Letter to Donald Trump, and it was on page 10A. And it's a letter to Donald Trump. Right after he made that statement, I had to write to this guy, and then we had it published. And the key here is how we're viewed in this country has to do with how we're educated. You see, black people in the very beginning, 400 years of chattel slavery, it was the law in this nation not to teach the slave to read. It was against the law. If you got caught reading or with a book, you got your fingers cut off, eyes plucked out, whatever it was. The point is that spirit exists today. People say, well, you always say that, but it happened. And Bishop, spirit doesn't go away. It's around us all the time. And all it takes is one idiot to do something crazy, and then all hell breaks loose. You heard that statement before. That's what happened in Washington, but it's nothing new. We have this continual going on, and we've got to do something with this education thing and start acknowledging the fact that these kids are going out into the world unprepared totally, and the key is they end up back in prison. I call it the musical chairs of recidivism. Please read that article and check it out, because sometimes you get a little frustrated and you just got to sit down and write, because it just has you going around like a whirlwind in your brain. Also, last but not least, Biden, he made a statement that the young man wasn't black enough. I wrote a letter to him. It's a letter to Joe Biden, June 2nd, 2020, same paper, same page, and it was a letter to Joe Biden. This one I says from the barbershop. So please read those two articles, because it's a frustrating thing unless you can get it out. Imagine not being able to sit down to read a paper or to be able to write something down. How much more frustration can that be for a person that can't read, write, counterspell, but yet you have a diploma in your hand? There's something wrong with that picture.
There's definitely something wrong with that picture, and we appreciate you always bringing this topic to our attention. And I think everybody should know the fact that the majority of folks incarcerated don't have literacy skills, high literacy skills, or any literacy skills at that. So that is what keeps people in that cycle, right? Because they don't have an avenue to pursue their hopes and dreams if they can't read and they can't comprehend. And reading, particularly reading at a certain age, this is the lifelong educator's daughter speaking. Shout out to Beverly Braxton, my mother. If you're not learning to read, what is it, Mom? By 3rd grade,
yep.
you have to be able to read in order to continue learning, and educating yourself. I mean, you will learn if you don't read, but you're just learning from absorbing what's happening around you versus actually being able to explore new information and enlighten and enrich yourself outside of what your immediate environment is providing you. So that's always a critical point. We appreciate it, Woody.
Let me just say real quick, I appreciate that. And back in the 1990s, some folk might remember Dr. Chirwanza Kunjufu wrote a series of books called The Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, and then a series of books on the conspiracy to destroy black girls. And it was all really about public education and what was happening with public education at the time. Woody, one of the things that's frustrating for me, not only watching folk that can't read and write and do arithmetic, and I mean, we should say that there's a part of its education system, part of its communal system that we have to address with providing proper community support to make sure our young people are learning. After all, it does say that it takes a village to raise a child. But there's also this piece that part of the reason we get caught in this vicious cycle is that people don't know civics. And so we stop really teaching civics in school as well. And so you come out, you're frustrated, you see problems in the system, and you don't even know how to address them, how to redress them, so you could get some solution. And then a lot of times when we finally do use our tools of voting or even going to sit down and talk to our political leaders, we don't ask for anything. We don't ask for much. White folk go in the door, they ask for everything. And black folk go in the door and we walk out with crumbs and feel like we got something. And I think that that is really part of the problem that we have, is that we don't ask for much. And maybe that's because of limited imagination, the capacity to have a scope of imagination about what the possibilities are for our communities. But we need to go in asking for more and demanding more, because I can assure you when white business leaders show up for the politicians, they're not going in for $500 for a youth group. They're going in and asking for millions or sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars for the things that they want. And a lot of times they get it. I keep asking the question over and over again, how did Comcast, one of the richest entertainment companies in the world, get a $140 million tax break from the city of Philadelphia to build a second tower in the city? $140 million to them is a drop in the bucket. They make $50 billion a quarter. So $140 million is nothing to them. So why did we give them $140 million to build a building in the city of Philadelphia? See, that's the stuff. But they went in and got it. And they got tax breaks from the state. And they got all this stuff to be able to build that building. Most of the time, it was not our folk that were on that project that were building that building and not having long-term impact, economic impact coming back into our neighborhoods. But we go in and we get satisfied asking for pennies and like, oh, we got so-and-so for our church or so-and-so for our community group. And the reality is that it's not enough money to be able to create and change the system that is really depressing you and economically at this moment in time. We got to think bigger. We got to have bigger vision. We have to have bold imagination, and we have to learn not to take no for an answer. And this is the problem when we don't teach civics in our schools either, so that people do not understand even the vehicles, the way to negotiate and to be able to ride through the system that we have and to be able to take control of it. And so we've got to learn to teach that all over again and help people understand that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
That was my rant for the day.
Okay. We'll see if we can get another one out of you before the hour is over. Let's go to Madeline in Overbrook. Hi, Madeline.
Hi. To both of you, great program.
Thank you.
The school thing is my number one thing. And ever since our Dr. Ackerman was lied on, run out of the school district, and then, of course, soon as she left, the pressure on her from Washington. She had been in Washington, and she did the same thing she did here. She had this program that we should have a parenting institute, because a lot of our parents got caught up in the 60s and 70s in drugs, et cetera. You know, there was the low birth rates, and Dr. Johnson, we had a group working on that and working on this and working on that. Anyway, to get back to now, what we have now is nothing for parents. People go to prison. They're not learning in prison. They used to learn in prison. I mean, he went in Detroit Red. He came out Malcolm X because he knew something and a whole bunch. But they don't even do that now. And so it is geared. It is geared, absolutely geared by all white folks that black people need to stay in their place, and that's on the bottom. And if we want different, then we're going to have to demand different. And so I run around the state with some other people. Now we got 12 black mayors in the state of Pennsylvania. Some of the children are doing better, some aren't. But if we can't bring our children up, it's going to be a long time making good change. Good change means that parents got to have time to talk to children. It means they got to read to them at night. They got to let them know how much they love them. I mean, they got to say it. Not like what we were taught from white people. You can't say that because, you're not really people anyway. You just do what you do. Even you breastfeed my baby.
about that, folks. We had a little technical issue. I think we got frozen there, but I think you can hear us now, and we're sorry if we got to.
Okay, it looks like we are still having some problems here, and we will try to work through that.
Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
My
great.
picture is not yet back, but I am here in spirit. Okay, there I am visually. Yep,
right.
had a little technical issue there. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Well, why don't we go to, you want to go to our caller? We have Cliff from Connecticut on the line.
Sure.
Sure, I'll get right to the point. Hi, this is Pastor. You have a church?
Yes.
Okay, great. You're the one I need to speak to. Listen, what you said earlier, I totally agree with you in terms of our education, our focus and our perspective on things has to change. But I think, Pastor, one of our biggest issues is church. You know, and so even with Martin Luther King, even with today being his birthday, you know, I think, in my opinion, even back then, when Martin Luther King did not speak of a day of service, but he spoke about injustice, he talked about the racism that exists, he had the courage to talk about reality and the things that exist. Now, on Monday, which is the legal holiday, the problem is, in my opinion, even in Connecticut, you had a few pastors this past Wednesday that talked about the event that took place on Sunday. So this past Sunday, they had the courage to speak about what took place. And the main things that they said was that if those were black people that did the same thing, that there would be a different outcome. There's a few black preachers that actually said that. But on Monday, what would be the message? If you were to send a message about Martin Luther King, what would be the message that you would send to our people? And other than, and I hate to say this, but other than the love factor, and we got to love everybody, the day of service, those are simply the wrong narratives that we're facing in this time, in this season. That is not what our people need to hear. Am I making a little business? You see where I'm going with this, Pastor?
Yeah. You actually missed earlier in the show when I talked about the fact I don't like the day of service notion for Dr. King Day, because we never saw Dr. King with a broom or a brush or a paintbrush or fixing something in the school. We actually saw Dr. King protesting in the streets, speaking truth to power, speaking truth to the people, calling people to stand up for systemic and societal change, stand up for their civil rights. And so I honestly think that the King Day ought to be about a day of action, not a day of service. And so that's and you missed that earlier in the show when we were in our opening.
Let me ask you this before I hang up.
Sure.
In your honest opinion, do you feel that the majority of our black pastors and preachers are preaching that?
No. So I mean, here's the problem though. Let me speak to this. So here's what happened: 60s, and we civil rights. We got the Voting Rights. We got the Civil Rights Act. Opportunities began to open for us across America, and I think what happened in that moment was that, in many ways, we kind of thought we had arrived. Like, we were making ways, we were beginning to operate in places. I know, for example, my parents moved into a neighborhood that was all white at the time. It's now all black, but we were on that cutting edge of black folk that moved in. We got different jobs. We were able to go to different colleges and schools and things of that nature. And I think we got comfortable. The problem was that what we didn't realize was behind the scene with that Nixon with the Southern Strategy and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce at the time were beginning to plant the seeds for how they would take the country back over. In the midst of all that, the black church got caught up in this notion of health and wealth and prosperity. And so we began to teach these bad economic policies from the pulpit that were rooted in white supremacy and rooted in this meritocracy that really had nothing to do with God in the first place. And we continue to see that today if you watch Christian television and listen to a lot of Christian ministers. Now, let me be clear. There's always been a prophetic strand of black clergy in this country. They've never gone away. The problem is that they don't have the churches of 10,000 people, because people flock to these churches because they want to learn how to build wealth. They want to learn how to have all these things, these material possessions. And so they go running into those congregations. And a lot of those clergy do not want to deal with political issues because they don't want to offend anybody in their congregations. A lot of those congregations have the big black muckety mucks, the politicians and the business leaders that are part of their congregations. They're middle class congregations. They're not addressing the concerns and the issues of the underclass. So there's always been a black political class that has maintained itself. It's been small. It's now beginning to burgeon and grow again, because we are now experiencing this hate, and it's public hate, because of social media and the fact that we have a preponderance of 24-hour-a-day media cycles now. There's this, they're beginning to see this, and so many of them that were caught up in that cycle are beginning to say, well, wait a minute, I've got to go back and reevaluate where I am, and I've got to really stand with my people, because it doesn't make a difference to a cop if you're a rich black person, a middle-class black person, or a poor black person. You're black, and that's really what the issue is. And when we go into businesses, when we're trying to get loans from banks, it's all the same thing. And so we really need to understand that there's a shift happening in this particular moment. There are prophetic black clergy out there. There are activist clergy out there. Now, what we also need, though, besides activist clergy, is we need activist congregations. It's not enough that your preacher is out there. Those that are in the pews need to be out there and engaging in the work as well. When we can get prophetic churches, that's when we're going to begin to see real change and transformation occur. So I just wanted to answer that question for you, Cliff, and offer some perspective on that as we get ready for this King Holiday weekend.
Is he gone?
I guess so. So,
okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I agree. Basically, I agree with you. You know, we're in an interesting time. We're really in an interesting time, and I think I may have said this last week on this show that, you know, there's a real possibility for a strong progressive agenda to be pushed, but we can't just look to the politicians to make it happen.
Right.
They have to be pushed by us. And when I say us, I mean everybody from the grassroots activist organizer to the people in the pulpits to the teachers educating the right way, to people in positions of power in our institutions like our school district, like our, you know, health system, all of that stuff. Every institution in our communities need to be pushing forward an agenda that centers people, that centers the average person, that centers caring for people. That's what we have to shift to. And if nothing else was learned in this pandemic, we have to center taking care of each other. That's what we have to do. And everybody, I don't care what position of power you have, if you work in corporate America, you work in the nonprofit sector, that's what we have to be focused on. We have to be focused on equity, so that people who are marginalized in society have equal access to those who are not. Those who have been centered in society their whole lives, you know, need to share, need to share what they have, you know. I was reading this, what I think is a really well put thing about this very thing. This is from, I hope I don't mess up his last name, Anand Giridharadas. Anand Giridharadas. He is a thinker. He has a blog that I just tuned into. And he talks about this period that we're in. And he says, when I look down at the ground of the present now, I feel depressed. If I lift my head to the horizon, I see a different picture. This is not the chaos of the beginning of something. This is the chaos of the end of something. It goes on, and I know that we're up on a break, so maybe I can finish sharing a little bit, because I think it's very prophetic what he is saying. So on the other side of the break, I can continue sharing. He talks about what we need to do in terms of equity as we push for a different kind of democracy.
Awesome.
You are listening to Solutions on WURD, and we will be right back.
What is dedication?
The thing that drives me every day as a dad is Dariana. We call him Day Day for short. Every day he's hungry for something, whether it's attention, affection, knowledge. And there's this huge responsibility in making sure that when he's no longer under my wing, that he's a good person. I want him to be able to sit back one day and go, we worked together, we did a good job.
That's dedication. Find out more at fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
As a business owner, hiring and developing people from the community that your company serves is one of the best ways to show commitment to that community. Let WURD Radio help with Livelihood, our new initiative that connects Philadelphians with companies like yours. We'll feature your business, open employment opportunities, and resources to connect your company with talent and ensure that you reach your target demographic. To learn more about how Livelihood can help you build your team, visit wordworks.com. That's WURD works.com. Livelihood is supported by the Nightland Fest's Local News Transformation Fund, Borealis Philanthropies Racial Equity and Journalism Fund, and the Solutions Journalism Network. You're listening to Solutions exclusively on WURD Radio, 96.1 FM and 900 AM WURD.
Welcome back to Solutions with Amadi Braxton and Dwayne Royster.
Hello.
Right before the break, I was sharing something from Anand Giridharadas, I think. I believe he's Indian American. But he says this is not the chaos of the beginning of something. This is the chaos of the end of something. Because the 40 years of this plutocratic takeover of the ideology that said if you're torn between doing what's good for money and what's good for people, always do what's good for money. These stories about lazy workers and welfare queens and any number of other fraudulent tales that were meant to justify a life in the Hamptons. If I allow myself to feel this way on a good day, it actually feels like it's burning down. And on the matters of race and identity, likewise, the Trump era doesn't have the crackle of a launch. It has been a mourning for white power, a mourning for a time when simply to be white was and show up was enough, a mourning for an era, mourning MOURNING, a mourning for an era in which simply to be a man and not necessarily an especially capable one could get you ahead of other people, a mourning for a time when you could be the default idea of an American and not have to share your toys. We must understand that what we've been living through is backlash. Backlash. It's not the engine of history. It is the revolt against the engine of history. Then we might remember, just to pat ourselves on the back for a second, that we are actually endeavoring to do right now. What we are actually endeavoring to do right now is to become a kind of society that has seldom, if ever, existed in history, which is to become a majority-minority democratic superpower. The essay goes on, but he's a really interesting writer, and I feel like he does have a prophetic voice in terms of helping us to see beyond our current circumstances and to provide an analysis that can really. He provides a sharp critique while also helping us see potential for a better future. So that's why I enjoy his work. But this idea that, you know, the showing up and being white and mediocre can get you more than other people who are of color and excellent, for example. Those days have to end. And and what we're seeing now with this, last kind of spasm of violence, and, there will be more. It's not the very last. There will be more. But the spasm of violence at the Capitol is people not wanting to let that privilege go. They want to be able to be mediocre and still get their just desserts, So, we're building a new future. And so that's what I'm counting on. And again, it takes everybody at all levels and all institutions. And we have to demand more. We have to have higher standards. And I can't wait to have State Rep Rad back on to do his analysis of the conservatism in the Democratic Party. You know, because we always, you know, lately there's a lot of criticism to heap on the Republican Party, but there is certainly a lot to heap on the Democrats as well, and so we have to have that conversation with him.
Absolutely. Sunday night I will be speaking for the Lancaster County NAACP, and will be, and the focus is economics, which is like one of my things. I'm not an economist, but I care deeply about the economy, and so I do a lot of organizing around the economy. And you know, I think it is important for us to understand, you know, as I said earlier, that there is no separation between racial and economic justice in this country. You cannot have one without the other. That they are inextricably tied together in the ways that this country is tied together, and that perhaps in this moment, what I refer to as an apocalyptic moment, for those that are, you know, deeply into prophecy, a lot of times people think of the apocalypse at the end times, but actually apocalypse, when you go back into the Greek, is actually rooted in the understanding of revelation, and that there has been much that has been revealed. And so in this revelation, the house is also burned down. So what does it mean for us to become architects of a new America? And I've talked about this theme before with our listeners. But what does it mean for us to take this moment and look at the world around us and see how painful, how divisive it is? That can we also understand that some of that mediocrity is white hurt, right? That is there too. And I'm not excusing it or making excuses for it, but there's, you know, when you've been told all your life you're wonderful. I was an article in Huffington Post a few years ago, it came out shortly after Ferguson. It was a white clergy person that wrote this article, and that said that equality feels like a demotion for white folk, right? It feels like a demotion. So these people who have been taught all their life that they're special are now recognizing they're not special anymore. So what does that mean? In much the same way that I would challenge that, and you know, you and I have talked about this offline, that for many black men right now, to not be able to be the dominant force in our community, it makes them feel like, you know, I got issues. What's going on with this? And they fight back. And so how do we, and I'm not talking about unity, but I am talking about alignment. How do we get people in alignment so that all of our needs are met and that we're able to thrive? Because I think we're not going to be able to get to a place of unity until we actually get to a place of healing. And we can't get to healing until we actually begin to see systemic change happen so that we can actually have real solid hope for the future. So this is a moment for us to be new architects, to redesign, to think about the world that we want, to engage in deep politics and policy, to engage in participatory democracy, not just a laissez-faire democracy, but participatory democracy where your voice is heard, where you're using all the vehicles that are available to you, whether it's social media, whether it's email, whether it's snail mail, whether it's your phone call, when COVID's over, showing up in people's offices and telling folk what you want, bringing your neighbors together and having conversation about what's important to them. And then you all work on it, those things that you all agree on, you work on them together to be able to create the change. That's what actually has to happen in this moment. And until we are willing to do that work and not sit back and say, well, that's somebody else's job, that's not my job. When we finally were willing to own it, step up and do the work, and as I'm often fond of saying, when we're willing to change the damn world, when we're willing to sit by and say, I'm not going to sit and take this anymore, that's when we're going to begin to see the change that we need. And that's the work that's in front of us. So we have we got some hard work ahead of us in the days ahead. I appreciate Eb Milner wrote on Facebook page after it was Cliff that was talking. He said, faith without action is dead. And the scripture says faith without works is dead. And so this is a moment when people of faith, people of moral courage, because you might not have a faith system, but you might have a moral system that you align with. People of faith and moral courage stand up and are not willing to take it anymore. And we're going to speak about a world and work towards a world where we're all able to thrive.
Yep, absolutely.
Second rant for the night.
That was a calm and soothing rant, I have to say. It was a serious content, but in a mellow, soothing voice. So I appreciated that. I think as we look ahead in this year and into this year and into 2022, we need to be oriented to what further, okay, now Biden and Harris are in office, well, as of next week, right? And we can't just sit back on our laurels. We have to be looking locally and statewide what political gains can be made. The redistricting fight is in one area. We have a seat opening up on the state Supreme Court. We have Senator Toomey, Senator Do Nothing Toomey, he has said he's not going to run again. People heard me talk about him last week, saying that he was disappointed that Trump lost, and then in two sentences later calling him a demagogue. I'm like, why are you upset or disappointed that a demagogue lost? Okay, it doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, but who could run for his seat on the Democratic side? Who could put forth a progressive populist agenda that would appeal to both people of color, black folks in urban areas, as well as white folks and, in rural areas of the state, who could do that cross-racial economic message that so many people are dying to hear in that campaign. So there's work to be done, and there's agendas to be shaped, and that's why I like doing this program with you.
I appreciate that. Now, where's Stacey Abrams in Pennsylvania when you need her?
I know. We need a Stacey Abrams in Pennsylvania. We do.
Shout out to all the sisters in Georgia that just held it down and turned it out again. I just can't say enough about all their work down there. So appreciate y'all.
Last week I had foreshadowed that we would have somebody on to talk about the role of the Supreme Court and the need to expand the court. This week, the person had a conflict that came up, and so we've rescheduled that guest for a couple of weeks from now. Because that is a key part of being able to actually put forth an agenda, have the Biden administration put forth an agenda that can actually live on, and not get thwarted by the Supreme Court or by all of the conservative judges that have been appointed to the lower federal courts. So that is a critical issue that we're going to take up in a couple of weeks.
That'd actually be a good issue. Actually, I sent you an article from Ballotpedia, which does a lot of the tracking of the judges. And we can't get them on next week or week after. We should actually have this conversation about who actually has the most judges federal judges right now, who appointed the most, and where that stands right now. I think that'll be a very interesting conversation to have.
Yes. And we need to do some education, I think, on this show about upcoming elections this year. Absolutely. There's a number of judge seats that are up, and a lot of times that is one of the seats during elections that we don't really pay much attention to. Not a lot of money is spent on those races. There's not a lot of advertising, so that people don't know who the candidates are, and I look forward to us being able to do some educating of folks on that here. So
awesome.
We're at the end. We're coming up on the end here. Thank you as always. Thank you, Troy, for holding it down. Even in the midst of little internet blips and technical difficulties, we always appreciate you holding this program together. And thank you, Bishop, for all you do. And how are you going to spend MLK Day?
I am actually we actually have an action. Power's got an action on Monday that we will be lifting up the issue around preemption in our state that prevents municipalities from setting their own wages. And we've got a campaign going on around that. And we're going to be joined by a couple of our state leaders to have this conversation and call for passing of a bill that we hope to get into the state house and state senate. So we're going to be doing an action, which is what we do on MLK Day, around getting a preemption passed here in the state of Pennsylvania.
Is that a virtual thing?
It's virtual, yeah. We're doing everything virtually because we believe in people's safety and sanctity of the human body. And so we want to, but we're going to do that virtually.
How can people, what time and how can people?
It is, and you can really get me to lie.
I know. I'm trying to pull the information.
I know you're trying to help me out and try to do the thing.
Trying to help a brother out. I'm trying to help a brother promote
you are
his
wonderful
event.
in that regard, and I appreciate that. And it is. I try to be so careful about saying stuff all the time about what Power is doing, but I do want to lift this up.
Mm-hmm.
So hang on one sec.
Well, I mean, annually, I'll just say, Power. You all have an annual event typically on MLK Day. That's a very powerful forum with a lot of speakers from different community, different organizations coming together, from the labor movement to, faith leaders of all stripes. It's usually a very powerful event. That is one thing I do go to after my, day of rest and reflection on MLK Day. I do make sure that I check out the Power event. So,
well, let me just say this real quick. It's 11 a.m. You can join us via Facebook, so it's easy. You can get on via Facebook. Our Power Interfaith page is put in Power Interfaith. You'll be able to access that on Facebook. And we're actually going to be doing some virtual phone banking as well. So you can call in to political leaders right then and there from your telephone. And we're going to do some training with that as well. So join us at 11 a.m. for that action right here on Facebook.
Excellent. Okay, great. Got it.
All right.
The Envy McKee show is up next. So stay tuned for Envy McKee. You want to close us out, Bish?
All right. Well, listen, everybody. Thank you all. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Amadi. Thank you to all of our listeners. Thanks, State Rep Chris Rabb, for everything that you did. Listen, go out, change the damn world, especially on this King weekend, because if you don't, nobody else will. Peace.
Peace.
We do it all for the love, y'all. Yeah, we do it all for the